On March 16, 2024, 40-year-old Luis Napoles fatally shot 25-year-old Megan Moore and her roommate, 23-year-old Sydney Capolino, at the victim's condo building in Miami. He killed Moore outside the building before entering the condo and gunning down Capolino. By the time police arrived, Napoles was also dead from a gunshot wound. According to law enforcement, Napoles was Moore's live-in boyfriend, but Moore's friends described him as a former colleague who was stalking and harassing the young woman. News outlets dug into his past and discovered that he had an arrest history dating back to 2003, when he was arrested for an alcohol-related offense. Napoles also had a history of alleged domestic abuse against his ex-wife, who blamed his substance abuse and mistreatment for the breakdown of their marriage. In court documents from 2017, Napoles' ex-wife described his relationship with his 2 children as essentially non-existent, stating that he often didn't even bother getting out of bed to greet his kids when they visited his mother's house, where he was living at the time. In the year before the double murder, Napoles was evicted from 2 apartments after losing his restaurant job and falling behind on the rent. Friends of Moore and Capolino insisted that he wasn't living with the victims when he killed them. A friend told the Daily Mail that Napoles had obsessively persisted in his efforts to date Moore. Even after she rejected his advances, he reportedly contacted Moore from different phone numbers, but Moore had not expressed a fear for her safety prior to the homicide. The specific circumstances leading up to the shooting were not detailed in news reports. Number 20. Tyson Andrew Christians. In early February 2025, 23-year-old Emily Ehrenberg was found murdered in the back of a car outside the Empire Mall in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. She had been stabbed several times. Police were called to the scene after Ehrenberg's ex-boyfriend, 24-year-old Tyson Andrew Christians, told someone inside the mall about what he had done. He surrendered without incident and reportedly confessed to the crime, telling investigators that he had been planning to kill Ehrenberg since 3 days earlier. He was upset with the victim because she had recently ended their 7-year relationship. On the day of the murder, Christians hid inside Ehrenberg's SUV outside her workplace. He approached Ehrenberg after her shift ended and persuaded her to go somewhere to talk. They drove to the mall parking lot, where Christians stabbed Ehrenberg once with a pocket knife. At that point, he said he realized he needed to kill Ehrenberg in order to prevent her from reporting him to the police. He stabbed her several more times, waited for her to die, and went inside a mall, where he repeatedly mentioned that he had killed someone. Following his arrest, Christians showed officers a pair of blood-stained shorts and stated his intention to plead guilty. Although he pleaded not guilty to a first-degree murder charge at his arraignment, he has a lengthy criminal history, including previous domestic violence offenses against Ehrenberg, and already had 7 open cases at the time of Ehrenberg's murder. Christians remains in custody with bond set at $2 million and could face life in prison or even the death penalty if convicted as charged. Number 19. Isaac Christenbury. 28-year-old Jenna Cox was gunned down in cold blood on October 22, 2024, at a home in Maiden, North Carolina. She had ended her relationship with the killer, 28-year-old Isaac Nathaniel Christenbury, the previous day. Christenbury entered a Maiden, North Carolina home and fatally shot Cox. He then killed her parents, Charles and Cindy Cox, as her young son looked on in horror. After initially putting the gun to the boy's head, Christenbury let him go. The boy sought help from a neighbor while Christenbury removed Jenna's body from the home. As he fled the scene in his vehicle, Christenbury dialed 911 and expressed a desire to turn himself in. Meanwhile, officers found Jenna's body next to an outdoor swimming pool, while Charles and Cindy were found deceased inside the home. All 3 victims had been shot multiple times, including in the head. Christenbury confessed to the triple homicide, and in February 2025, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Number 18. David Sosa. On October 15, 2024, 17-year-old David Sosa entered the Rochelle Police Department in Illinois and confessed to being involved in a murder. He had walked 11 miles from his home in Ashton, where officers found his girlfriend and the mother of his child, Jaden Hill, dead with a belt around her neck and a knife lying nearby. She had been strangled to death, and Sosa was charged as an adult with multiple murder counts. Against his attorney's advice, Sosa pleaded guilty to 1 count of first-degree murder in February 2025. His defense lawyer had urged him to wait for the case to develop more and to undergo an evaluation to identify any potential mitigating factors. But Sosa turned down the evaluation and stood by his decision to plead guilty. He also asked to go straight to an adult prison rather than starting his sentence in a juvenile detention center. 2 counts of murder with the intent to kill were dropped in exchange for Sosa's guilty plea, and the judge sentenced him to 40 years in prison. He'll become eligible for parole after serving 20 years. During a victim impact statement, Hill's mother expressed devastation over the loss of her daughter, but said that she forgave Sosa for his actions. Number 17. Raymond Evans. 33-year-old mother of 3, Cecilia Perez, was reported missing in Omaha, Nebraska on November 21, 2023, after being last heard from 3 days earlier. Later that day, some workers found her body while clearing trees from a field in rural Lancaster County, roughly 60 miles away from where Perez was last seen. She had been beaten to death by her boyfriend, 33-year-old Raymond Evans, who had killed her in Omaha before driving to Lincoln and dumping the body. Perez had been with Evans for less than a year when she was murdered. Prior to the discovery of her body, Evans had shared a missing persons flyer on Facebook. He went to a police station at the urging of Perez's aunt, who asked him to request the missing woman's phone records, and he's been in custody ever since. Speaking with ABC 8, Perez's sister described the family's repeated efforts to help her get away from her abusive partner. And this wasn't the family's first time losing a loved one to domestic violence, prompting Perez's grieving relatives to speak out about the importance of being there for victims who are trying to escape. In December 2024, a jury found Evans guilty of first-degree murder after deliberating for less than an hour. He was sentenced to life without parole plus 40 to 50 years for a weapon charge. Number 16. Malik McCormick. While responding to a reported shooting at around 3 a.m. in December 2022, Baltimore police found a pregnant 19-year-old woman named Jabrial Terry suffering from 9 gunshot wounds outside an apartment building. She was rushed to the hospital where she and her unborn child succumbed to their injuries. Terry was just a few months away from giving birth at the time of her death. Investigators quickly shifted their focus to Terry's boyfriend and the baby's father, Malik McCormick, who claimed he hadn't seen the victim in 2 days when police delivered a death notice at his home. Prosecutors charged McCormick with first-degree murder, knowingly committing a crime against a pregnant person, firearm use in a felony violent crime, and having a handgun on his person. He pleaded guilty in January 2025 and was sentenced to life, with all but 15 years suspended. McCormick apologized for his actions during his sentencing hearing, and the judge praised Terry's family for their strength, stating that it was the first time in her 2-decade career that she had heard victim impact statements without any angry words. Number 15. Trevon Wright. 17-year-old high school junior Ikea Imari Hood was gunned down at her Dallas home just 3 weeks after giving birth in January 2024. She was just feet away from her newborn when she was shot in the back of her head. Hood's mother overheard the gunshot, but the teen's bedroom door was locked, so she climbed in through the window and found her daughter dead. Hood had recently broken up with fellow student Trevon Darnell Wright after discovering through a paternity test that he wasn't the child's father. He was visiting Hood at the time of the murder and had already fled the scene by the time Hood's mother found her body. Wright was later picked up by U.S. Marshals on a first-degree murder charge. During his trial in early 2025, he claimed that the shooting was accidental and that the gun went off during a struggle with Hood, who was trying to take the weapon away from him. The prosecution argued that the murder was deliberate. While highlighting Wright's controlling behavior in the months leading up to the crime, the jury found Wright guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison. Number 14. Jevon Tyrese Fletcher. On Saturday, February 15th, police in New Haven, Connecticut received multiple calls from the neighbors of 19-year-old Haley Miller, who said that they could hear the young woman screaming inside her apartment. Officers found her lying on the ground outside after jumping out a second-story window in an apparent attempt to escape from an attacker. Inside, they found the body of a young boy. Both victims had been stabbed to death, and the other victim was identified as the son of Miller's boyfriend, 26-year-old Jevon Tyrese Fletcher, who was also found at the scene with injuries. He had also jumped out a window and had landed on a walkway. After being treated at a hospital, Fletcher was discharged into police custody and booked into jail on 2 counts of murder. 2 counts of murder with special circumstances, and 1 count of risk of injury. He remains in custody with bond set at $3 million, and the judge ordered for all court documents to remain sealed until his next hearing, which is scheduled for March 13th. Number 13. James Drahos. 56-year-old Tammy Dubison hadn't been seen in nearly a month when she was reported missing in Cleveland, Ohio in June of 2024. Her live-in boyfriend of 35 years, 59-year-old James Drahos, hadn't bothered to alert law enforcement to her disappearance. The report was made by the couple's daughter after she found teeth and jawbone fragments in the driveway of their home. James was promptly arrested on suspicion of murder. During a jailhouse phone call with his daughter later that day, he admitted to killing Dubison, initially claiming that he had taken her out with a single blow. He then changed his story, saying he had shot Tammy, only to revert back to the original version of events. During police questioning, James claimed that he realized Dubison was dead when he discovered her body outside the next morning. He said he wrapped the remains in a trash bag and placed them in a garbage can. According to prosecutors, James dismembered the body several weeks later. He placed the severed parts in several garbage bags and used a wagon to pull them to a nearby school where he threw the bags into a dumpster. Dubison's body was never recovered from the landfill where the dumpster's contents were taken. James denied dismembering Dubison's body, but admitted to pulling several of her teeth out in an attempt to make her remains more difficult to identify in the event that they were ever found. He said he struck Tammy after she called him useless during a drunken argument about work. Without a body, prosecutors acknowledged that they have no way of knowing exactly what happened to Dubison, and they faced an uphill battle when it came to proving their case. For this reason, they were open to negotiating a plea agreement, and in January 2025, James pleaded guilty to a reduced involuntary manslaughter charge as well as tampering with evidence, offenses against a human corpse, and domestic violence. The judge sentenced him to the maximum term of 11 to 16.5 years in prison for the manslaughter charge, along with a consecutive term of 5 to 12 months for the evidence tampering charge. Between both sentences, he'll likely serve between 14 and 19.5 years in prison, and he'll have an opportunity to reduce his sentence by 15% with good time. Number 12. Geovanni Otero. 29-year-old Geovanni Otero became one of Philadelphia's most wanted fugitives following the murder of his ex-girlfriend, 29-year-old Melody Rivera, who was found buried in a shallow grave at a park in November 2024. She had been bludgeoned to death after being last seen with Otero about a week earlier, and the two had recently been involved in a dispute with one another, according to police. Otero has a lengthy criminal history dating back to his preteen years. He had recently been released from prison after serving time for a gun charge and had stopped communicating with his parole officer around the time of the murder. The accused killer remained at large for more than 3 months before being captured in New York State while driving a vehicle that had been reported stolen out of Virginia. Otero tried to flee from the police but was captured after he lost control of the car and crashed. He was in possession of multiple fake IDs after providing one of them to the cops in an apparent attempt to prevent them from finding out who he really was. According to the most recent available updates, he's awaiting extradition to Pennsylvania, where he'll face a murder charge. He also faces charges in New York State, including reckless driving, unlawful fleeing, criminal possession of stolen property, false impersonation, and obstructing governmental administration. Number 11. Joshua Andrews. On what began as an ordinary Monday morning in January 2025, 29-year-old mother of 3, Glynis Jackson, was kidnapped from outside the Nissan plant in Canton, Mississippi, where she worked. The vehicle fled onto a nearby interstate, where Jackson tried to escape by jumping out onto the road. She had been shot multiple times and was fatally struck by another car in her desperate attempt to flee from her captor. Authorities identified the accused killer as Jackson's ex-boyfriend, 29-year-old Joshua DeMarshall Andrews. He was initially charged with capital murder and being a felon in possession of a firearm, and is now facing additional charges following the discovery that Jackson was pregnant at the time of her death. Andrews is being held without bail for the crime, which occurred among an alarming spate of domestic violence-related deaths in the Jackson metro area. Number 10. Charles Franklin Cook. 44-year-old mother of 4, Melinda Jolly, was found dead inside her Cobb County, Georgia home in January 2024 after a concerned cousin came by to check on her. The woman's family had become worried about her well-being after being unable to reach her, and police deemed the nature of her death as suspicious. According to court documents, her body had multiple blunt force trauma injuries to the head and neck. Police were familiar with the address, where they had been called numerous times in the past over domestic disputes between Jolly and her boyfriend, 42-year-old Charles Franklin Cook. Just 3 months earlier, Cook had been arrested after picking Jolly's twins up from school while drunk. One of the kids became trapped in the car while he was passed out, forcing police to smash the window in order to retrieve the child. A neighbor told reporters that they were unaware of the abuse that was going on inside the home, but that they wished they had known because maybe Jolly would still be alive. Shortly after the discovery of Jolly's body, police tracked Cook to Crestview, Florida, where Okaloosa County deputies arrested him in the parking lot of a Publix supermarket. He was extradited to Cobb County, where he was found guilty of felony murder, aggravated assault, and 3 counts of cruelty to children in early 2025. He was sentenced to life without parole. Number 9. Anthony Eliff III. 32-year-old Eliff III was reported missing in Corpus Christi, Texas, in late 2019 after leaving the home she shared with her mother to visit her boyfriend, Anthony Eliff III, in Harlingen. 4 months later, her heavily decomposed remains were found in the city of San Benito. While no official cause of death was determined due to the condition of the body, prosecutors theorized that Eliff had shot Loera. He was charged with murder in May of 2022 while already detained on suspicion of another murder charge. Eliff was accused of killing his roommate, Guillermo Willie C. Garcia, who died from a single gunshot wound to the chest in February 2020. He was found guilty of Garcia's murder and sentenced to 75 years in prison. In October 2023, in early 2025, Eliff pleaded guilty to Loera's murder. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, which will run concurrent to his 75-year term. Number 8. Orenthia Upshur. In January 2025, police in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, were contacted by a concerned relative of 51-year-old Orenthia Upshur, who said that Upshur had shown up at their house and confessed to shooting his girlfriend in a hotel room. Using cell phone location data, officers located the deceased victim, 49-year-old Maisha Kuhn, at a sleep-in, where she was found dead on the floor from gunshot wounds. Surveillance footage showed Upshur leaving the hotel with a gun in his pocket. According to law enforcement, there had been several domestic violence incidents between the couple in the days leading up to Kuhn's murder. As the investigation in Bensalem unfolded, police in Trenton, New Jersey, received a call from an Uber customer about a man firing gunshots from inside his pickup truck. One of the bullets had struck the Uber driver's car, but both the driver and passenger were unharmed. While responding to the call, officers overheard gunshots from nearby. As they tried to locate the source of the noise, they were alerted to a burglary in progress. According to a 911 caller, an armed man was trying to force his way into a residence. Police evacuated the area and a tactical response team made entry into the home, where Upshur had barricaded himself inside. According to law enforcement, he had come to Trenton with plans to kill Kuhn's family. Upshur is currently in custody in New Jersey, where he faces 58 felony charges, including 11 counts of attempted murder of a police officer and multiple counts of criminal attempted homicide, burglary, and aggravated assault on law enforcement officers. He'll eventually be extradited to Pennsylvania, where he faces a criminal homicide charge. Number 7. Scott Drollinger. 38-year-old Anna Marie Gonzalez was eager to move on with her life after ending her relationship with 38-year-old Scott Drollinger in December 2024. She moved into her own apartment with her 2 daughters, who later told reporters that Drollinger had been physically abusive toward their mother in the past. Police had responded to the home on multiple occasions, but these visits never ended in any arrests. On a Saturday night in February 2025, Gonzalez left the apartment without telling her daughters where she was going. They would later learn that Drollinger had convinced her to meet him at a bar in Georgetown, Kentucky. Later that night, Drollinger lost control of his truck while driving at speeds of up to 98 miles per hour with Gonzalez in the passenger seat. The vehicle struck a utility pole, some concrete steps, and a metal fence before stopping. Gonzalez was impaled by the wreckage and died at the scene. Drollinger refused a breathalyzer at the scene and was taken to the hospital, where police say his blood alcohol content tested at nearly twice the legal limit. After being treated for non-life-threatening injuries, he was booked into custody on suspicion of murder, first-degree criminal mischief, and operating a motor vehicle while under the influence. The victim's family members told local news station WAVE that they believed Drollinger crashed his truck intentionally. Gonzalez's daughter said, "He wanted total control over my mum and her whole life, but she pulled away and she left him, so he didn't like that." Drollinger remains in custody with bond set at $1 million and could go to prison for life if convicted as charged. Number 6. DeAndre Wright. 25-year-old Jasmine Muldoon was reported missing on Sunday, May 5th, 2024. Later that evening, police received a visit from the concerned mother of the young woman's boyfriend, 23-year-old DeAndre Wright, who said that she feared the couple may have gotten into a physical argument. She became worried after being unable to reach Muldoon and was overheard taking a video call from Wright while filing the police report. During the conversation, the dispatcher overheard Wright making a comment that caused law enforcement to upgrade the urgency of the investigation. While Texas Rangers searched for the couple, investigators paid a visit to their home where they found blood evidence in the master bedroom. Muldoon's body was found in a wooded area north of Livingston, not far from the home, and Wright was arrested on suspicion of murder. She had died from a single stab wound. Prosecutors were preparing to go to trial in January 2025 after plea negotiations failed, when they reached a last-minute agreement with Wright, who pleaded guilty in exchange for a 50-year prison sentence. Number 5. Jabrial Terry. 24-year-old Nia Stokes was 9 months pregnant when she was killed in a car accident in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. On her due date in May of 2024, she was riding as a passenger with her boyfriend and her unborn child's father, 27-year-old Jabrial Terry. When Terry crossed into oncoming traffic and struck another car, he would later admit that he was high on opioids and marijuana at the time of the crash. Stokes was found unresponsive at the scene and rushed to the hospital, where she and her unborn child succumbed to their injuries. Terry initially claimed that Stokes was driving at the time of the wreck, but authorities managed to disprove him based on their findings. He was charged with 2 counts of homicide by vehicle while driving under the influence, along with drug-related offenses. In February 2025, Terry pleaded guilty to the homicide charges and was sentenced to 6 to 12 years in prison. He said he was pleading guilty to take responsibility for his actions as he spoke in front of the courtroom, which was packed with Stokes' family members. Number 4. Stephen Schiovone. 26-year-old Susan Ambrosino vanished without a trace in February 2005 at the tail end of a night out in Franklin Square, New York. She left her daughter with a babysitter and never returned home after meeting up with her ex-husband, Keith, and his half-brother, Stephen Schiovone. Keith told police that he never met with Susan because she didn't call him to finalize plans, but that he had received a call from her earlier that day. He claimed that Susan wanted to meet him to give him information that would change their lives forever. Schiovone said that he and Susan had gone separate ways after meeting at a restaurant, and police became suspicious after learning that he and Keith had a contentious past. Susan and Schiovone had grown close after Susan divorced Keith and moved back to her hometown, where both their families lived, while Keith stayed behind in Colorado. Keith moved back to New York the year before Susan's disappearance, with plans to reconcile their relationship. By then, Susan and Schiovone had become more than friends, and while they took efforts to keep their relationship under wraps, a bitter rivalry ensued between the half-brothers. The day after she went missing, Susan was found murdered in the trunk of her car. She had been shot in the head. Police received a shocking tip from her brother, who said that Susan had recently discovered that she was pregnant with Schiovone's child. This was problematic not only because of the tensions between Schiovone and Keith, but because Schiovone had a pregnant living girlfriend and didn't want to end the relationship. According to Susan's brother, she wanted to tell Keith about the pregnancy, but Schiovone had repeatedly persuaded her to keep it a secret. Investigators were able to place him at the crime scene through cell phone location records, and he admitted to killing Susan. When confronted with the evidence, Schiovone pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and second-degree criminal possession of a weapon and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He's serving his time at the infamous Sing Sing prison in Ossining and will become eligible for parole in 2030. Number 3. Casey Kindt. 36-year-old Jamie Hagan's family did everything in their power to protect her from her abusive ex-fiancé, 54-year-old Casey Kindt. Hagan also took proactive measures on her own, including obtaining a restraining order against Kindt after he assaulted and threatened her and her daughter at their Seward, Nebraska home in December 2024. Following the incident, Kindt was charged with making terroristic threats, domestic assault, and child abuse. He posted bond and was released, but was taken back into custody in January 2025 after violating his bond conditions by contacting Hagan. Prosecutors urged the judge to revoke the bond, but he instead raised it to $75,000. Kindt once again posted bond and was released. The very next day, he went to Hagan's house and shot her multiple times. Officers arrived at the home to find Hagan dead, and Kindt clinging to life with a bullet wound to the head. He reportedly remains hospitalized while Hagen's family grapples with the reality of her death. The woman's father told local station KKTV that he believes his daughter would still be alive if Kindt had not been released from jail, and that the system failed Hagen after she did all the right things in her attempts to escape from Kindt's abuse. Today's topic was inspired by Tamika Davis, 6641. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Stephen Heck. 63-year-old Cynthia Amalfitano was dedicated to her job as a preschool teacher, which is why people immediately began to worry when she failed to show up at work one morning in September 2023. She was reported missing, and her body was found at a park near her Newcastle County, Delaware home. Suspicion quickly fell on Amalfitano's boyfriend, 66-year-old Stephen Heck. Prosecutors accused him of strangling and beating Amalfitano to death shortly after the couple returned to Pike Creek from an overnight trip to Rehoboth Beach. Security footage showed Heck coming and going from the woman's home that night, but Amalfitano did not appear in the video, leading to the suspicion that she died during that time. In October 2024, a jury found Heck guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. We will line up our episode about when being head over heels goes wrong after number 1. Stick around if you haven't seen that one yet. Number 1. Antwaun Ware. 21-year-old Jasmine Dunbar was last seen leaving her Phoenix, Arizona residence with her young child in March of 2018. Her daughter was found abandoned in a car seat along a roadside hours later, sparking an immediate search for the young woman. Police were eager to talk to her ex-boyfriend, 20-year-old Antwaun Ware. After identifying him as the last known person to be with the missing woman, officers showed up at his home at 3:30 in the morning, and he initially claimed that he had dropped Dunbar back off at her apartment during an argument after they went to get a paternity test done to see if he was the father of her child. He later admitted to punching Dunbar during an altercation, but claimed that she was alive when he left her injured in a field. Ware later returned to the scene and set Dunbar's body on fire with a cigarette. Her remains were found charred beyond recognition the following day, and Ware was charged with multiple crimes, including first-degree murder. The case languished in the court system for the next 7 years. Finally, in early 2025, Ware pleaded guilty to the charge and was sentenced to life in prison. An Iowa man was charged with first-degree murder and held on a $10 million bond after shooting his co-worker 3 times on June the 12th of 2015. 22-year-old Alexander Matthew Kozak had worked as a security guard at the Coral Ridge Mall in Coralville. Court records indicated that Kozak had been engaged in a verbal and electronic semi-romantic relationship with co-worker Andrea Farrington. When Farrington broke off the relationship on the day in question, Kozak went home and retrieved his gun. At around 7:30 p.m., he went back to the mall and shot Farrington in the back. Despite the resuscitation efforts of several responders, the 20-year-old died. Soon after the shooting, officials identified Kozak as the suspect after witnesses said they'd recognized him and seen him fleeing the scene. Troopers subsequently spotted his vehicle on Interstate 80 near Davenport and arrested him without incident. During his trial in April of 2016, Kozak's defense reportedly attempted to show that he'd snapped during the shooting. They said that Kozak was mentally ill and shouldn't be punished for first-degree murder. They brought in a psychiatrist who'd diagnosed Kozak with intermittent explosive disorder and borderline personality disorder, both of which could send him into a rage wherein he couldn't think or control his emotions. Kozak's wife, Kelly, took the stand in her husband's defense, claiming his rage was evident in their relationship. According to investigators, Kozak had shown no emotion or remorse after admitting to shooting Farrington. Prosecutors maintained that he'd murdered the woman after she called off their relationship. Kozak was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder. He was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole in June of 2016. Number 10. Jordanos Berghain. 19-year-old Jordanos Berghain, a native of Eritrea, was found unresponsive, lying in a pool of blood at her home in Birmingham, England, on July the 31st of 2021. The ordeal unfolded when Helfam Weldy Johannes, a Sheffield man who grew up in the same village as Berghain and knew her for several years, called her on July the 30th. The 26-year-old told her He was in love with her, but his feelings weren't reciprocated according to court records. Welde Johannes told Brahane that he wanted to meet her, but she told him not to come. Despite being rejected, he traveled to Birmingham and convinced her to let him stay the night in a separate room. Shortly after 2:30 a.m. the next morning, Brahane texted a housemate saying, "I am worried. Where are you?" Shortly before 6 a.m., the housemaid heard Brahane screaming and went to her room. When she opened the door, she saw Welde Johannes strangling Brahane on the floor. The housemaid called law enforcement and Welde Johannes fled. Brahane died as a result of 15 stab wounds to her face and neck as well as strangulation. Investigators determined that after Welde Johannes stabbed and strangled Brahane, he then tried to set fire to her body before fleeing. He was arrested in Stoke-on-Trent the next day. In August of 2022, he admitted to murder and was sentenced to life behind bars with a minimum term of 21 years. Number 9. Jennifer Renee Cranach. California woman Jennifer Renee Cranach was shot in the head while she was walking home in Lemon Grove. The 30-year-old was at Dirk's nightclub on Broadway at around 10:30 p.m. on January the 2nd of 2013. She was having drinks with an acquaintance named Casey Michael Tashida, aged 32. While the two were walking out to smoke, Cranach bumped into Jeanette Malanga. Cranach apologized and continued walking toward the exit with Tashida. Upon their return, Tashida confronted Malanga, but their ensuing argument was quickly broken up. After the incident, Tashida and Cranach started disputing why the former had to argue with Malanga. Cranach then told Tashida that the reason he had no girlfriend was because he was an a-hole. The man then left the bar. Surveillance video revealed that Tashida left the bar at around 1:30 a.m. while Cranach left at approximately 1:43 a.m. Moments later, Tashida approached Cranach beside the road at the 7600 block of Pacific Avenue, opened fire, and left her lying in the street. After San Diego County deputies found her at around 2 a.m., she was rushed to Mercy Hospital but didn't survive her injuries. Tashida reportedly fled in his truck to his mother's home in Happy Valley, Oregon, where the Portland Police Bureau arrested him on January the 5th. When his truck was searched, several guns were found, as well as Cranach's blood on the driver's side armrest door handle. He was later extradited back to San Diego. During his trial, his attorney said that the suspect and the victim had exchanged unkind words the night they were at the bar. According to the victim's mother, Cranach had turned Tashida down because she didn't want him, so he stole her daughter's life. Tashida, who'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and PTSD, argued that Cranach led him on. He claimed that it wasn't his intent to kill her, but snapped because of her statements. Prosecutors said that he was obsessed with a woman and couldn't take no for an answer. In November of 2014, the man was convicted of first-degree murder. A month later, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, plus 25 years to life. Number 8. Myra Zulfikar. A Pakistani man confessed to killing 25-year-old British-Belgian woman Myra Zulfikar, who was also of Pakistani origin, after his marriage proposal was allegedly refused by her. In March of 2021, Zulfikar traveled from London, England to Lahore, Pakistan to attend a wedding. Several weeks later, she filed a police report accusing a man of abducting her at gunpoint and attempting to assault her. According to the victim's uncle, 26-year-old Zahir Jadoon and another man had threatened Zulfikar. It was unclear if they were the same men the woman accused in the police report, but Zulfikar was believed to have been in a relationship with Jadoon. The latter had rented a house in the defense area so that they could spend time there away from her family. On May the 3rd, Zulfikar's lifeless body, which sustained bullet wounds to the neck and shoulder, was found inside the house. The autopsy report indicated that the victim had been tortured and strangled to death. On May the 24th, police announced Jadoon's confession. Jadoon claimed that after his marriage had been rejected by Zulfikar, he then flew into a rage. He then pointed the finger at other men who conspired with him to carry out the crime. He revealed that they were with him on the night of the murder. On September the 14th, Jadoon, his brother Tahir, and Mohammed Wasim were indicted in the murder case of Zulfikar. After the three pleaded not guilty, it never became clear if any of them were convicted. Number 7. Judith K. In the North German state of Schleswig-Holstein, a woman only identified as Judith K. was stabbed to death by a secret admirer on the evening of July the 31st of 2019. The 25-year-old had lived in the village of Zübeck with her boyfriend Bjorn K. On the evening in question, neighbors reportedly heard Judith screaming, and they subsequently discovered her bloody as she lay on the floor. Meanwhile, her alleged attacker, 62-year-old Karl-Heinz D., was standing nearby. The neighbors locked him in a bathroom and called the police and emergency medical services. When authorities arrived, the woman was already dead. The post-mortem later confirmed that she died from multiple stab wounds to her upper body. Apparently, the suspect was Bjorn's close friend. Bjorn told local media that he and Judith would spend time together with Karl-Heinz up to 7 days a week. He added that he could certainly imagine that Karl-Heinz might have fallen in love with his girlfriend. As of the latest updates, a judge ordered Karl-Heinz to remain in custody on manslaughter charges, according to a prosecution spokesman. Number 6. Sean Roberts. On November the 29th of 2015, Englishman Glyn Williams killed a woman he tried to pursue romantically and staged the scene to make it look as if it were a burglary. Williams had met 36-year-old Sean Roberts from Salford through friends. He reportedly had showered Roberts with gifts weeks prior to her death. According to one of Roberts' friends, Deanna Dice, Williams had said that he was madly in love with Roberts and that he was going to marry her. However, Dice claimed that there was nothing intimate between them. The night before the murder, Roberts threw a party at her Higher Brofton flat on St. Heliers Drive, and Williams was one of the guests. Investigators suspected that the next day Roberts found out that Williams had been stealing from her and confronted him about it. She was subsequently stabbed 4 times by Williams, who then spent hours trying to cover his tracks. He placed a vibrator and a pair of handcuffs at the scene, put a knife in her hand, and covered the body with a duvet, a pillow, and pieces of clothing. CCTV footage revealed that Williams fled the scene through the back of the property and over a neighbor's fence. 2 days later, Roberts' ex-boyfriend found Roberts' lifeless body and called the police. Williams was later caught, and the pair of shoes he was wearing matched the description of the blood-trodden shoe prints found at the scene of the crime. He denied any involvement in Roberts' death, but DNA found on his footwear matched the DNA at the crime scene and was also the same DNA under the victim's fingernails. After Williams was convicted, he was sentenced to life in jail in February of 2017. The 53-year-old was ordered to serve a minimum of 21 years behind bars. Number 5. Scott Amadure. Michigan man Jonathan Schmitz, who was convicted of killing his gay secret admirer, was freed after serving 22 years in prison. On March the 6th of 1995, Schmitz, aged 24, was invited to appear on a taping of the national daytime talk show, The Jenny Jones Show, where he'd meet the secret admirer. During the taping, the show host brought out Schmitz on stage and revealed that the admirer was his acquaintance, 32-year-old Scott Amadure. Schmitz laughed and politely claimed that he was completely heterosexual. 3 days later, Schmitz, who was reportedly intoxicated, bought a 12-gauge shotgun and went to Amadure's home in Lake Orion, where he then fatally shot him. Schmitz immediately called 911 and told police he'd committed the murder because he'd been humiliated on national TV. He was found guilty of second-degree murder in 1996 and was handed a 25 to 50-year sentence. The verdict was later overturned due to jury selection errors. After Schmitz was retried in 1999, he still received the same penalty. During a hearing in March of 2017, he was credited for his good behavior while in prison. Schmitz was then released on parole on August the 22nd of 2017. Number 4. Caroline Nozal. When 26-year-old murder suspect Christopher O'Crowley was arrested on February the 3rd of 2016, he told police he wanted to do it sooner, but he needed to practice shooting his gun. O'Crowley worked at Metro Market Cottage Grove in Madison, Wisconsin. He was suspended a month earlier for harassing 24-year-old co-worker Caroline Nozal. According to a co-worker, the two had been in somewhat of a relationship, but apparently the man wanted more. The co-worker said that O'Crowley was upset because Nozal was leaving him. Following his suspension, he forebodingly began planning Nozal's death in the event of his termination from work. As a result of Nozal's harassment complaint against him, he did get fired on February the 1st. After his termination, he went out and purchased an M&P Shield 9mm handgun and 25 rounds of ammunition at around 8 p.m. on February the 2nd. As Nozal was leaving work, O'Crowley was waiting beside her car in the parking lot. When he saw Nozal, he stood up and pulled the trigger, hitting her in the abdominal area. She fell to the ground and got shot once more, this time in the head. O'Crowley absconded and Nozal was later pronounced dead at the hospital. After media reports showed photos of O'Crowley as the suspect, he was subsequently identified by a citizen. The following day, near the East Town Mall, he was confronted by law enforcement, during the course of which he exchanged gunfire with an officer who wasn't harmed in the aftermath. O'Crowley was eventually taken into custody facing charges in connection with the shooting death of Nozal and for shooting at police. In July, he pleaded guilty to first-degree intentional homicide and first-degree recklessly endangering safety. 2 months later, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. He was later found dead at the Warpen Correctional Institution on May the 2nd of 2017. The circumstances surrounding his death never became clear, but according to his lawyer, O'Crowley was diagnosed with anxiety, psychosis, and obsessive behavior when he was 10 and was prescribed medication. Number 3. Lisa and Anna Trubnikova. "I love you" were 30-year-old Anna Trubnikova's last words to her wife, Lisa, after realizing they might only have seconds to live on February the 5th of 2015. Local police in Bourne, Massachusetts, responded to Roundhouse Road on reports of gunshots and a car fire. According to police, 31-year-old Adrian Lawyer had purposefully set his car on fire and placed several fake bombs to distract officers while breaking into the couple's home. Lawyer opened fire at the home multiple times, hitting Anna and Lisa, aged 31. The latter ultimately succumbed to 11 gunshot wounds. After a half-hour standoff with the police, Lawyer finally gave in and was arrested. In the aftermath, Anna and a responding officer who'd also been shot were hospitalized. When police told relatives about the incident, a family member said that Lawyer had been fixated on Lisa. The man had known both Lisa and Anna from their time in the Coast Guard. The three of them were previously stationed in Kodiak, Alaska. During Lawyer's interrogation, he claimed that Lisa had assaulted him and ruined his life after he'd filed a report against her. Prosecutors said the killing was revenge because it cost him a promotion. On September the 12th of 2017, Barnstable Superior Court jury found Lawyer guilty of first-degree murder committed with extreme atrocity, cruelty, and deliberate premeditation. He was convicted of multiple assault and firearms offenses and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Number 2. Leanne Duffy. On September the 1st of 2014, 26-year-old English woman Leanne Duffy was fatally stabbed by a man she'd turned down. Shortly before 3 p.m., Duffy was in her apartment living room on Hatherley Road. Lloyd Byfield then violently broke into the home carrying a kitchen knife and claw hammer, which he used to stab Duffy 14 times. When Duffy's young daughter tried to intervene, Byfield attacked her before absconding. After receiving reports of the stabbing, police and paramedics responded and found Duffy suffering from wounds to her arm and neck. London Air Ambulance then took Duffy to an East London hospital while her daughter received treatment at the scene. 2 days later, Duffy succumbed to her injuries. The murder weapons used by the suspect were recovered at the scene by detectives. On September the 17th, Byfield admitted to a police community support officer that he was wanted by authorities, saying there was no point in hiding. Before being arrested by the police, he told the officer that the devil came into his head during the attack. According to the police, forensic evidence, phone records, and witness accounts immensely incriminated Byfield. The lead investigator said that the killing was motivated by jealousy, as the suspect had previously wished to pursue a relationship with Duffy. Byfield pleaded guilty to murder in March of 2015. The following month, he was imprisoned for a minimum of 26.5 years. Number 1. Janess Tolton Jackson. Shortly before 2 a.m. on January the 22nd of 2016, Pittsburgh Bureau police officers were called to the Cliffs Bar and Grill on North Lang Avenue. Dispatchers received a report regarding a Pennsylvania woman who'd been shot at the place in question. Nearby officers spotted a silver sedan driving at a high rate of speed and subsequently pulled it over. 2 officers approached the driver of the car, later identified as Charles McKinney, but the 41-year-old quickly drove off. The officers gave chase, during which McKinney's vehicle struck a tree, causing him to stop. McKinney then abruptly backed up and fled again. McKinney finally crashed into 2 other vehicles in a residential neighborhood and was arrested. According to the police, McKinney was responsible for the shooting that was called in earlier, and the victim, 29-year-old Janess Tolton Jackson, succumbed to a gunshot wound in her chest. McKinney allegedly shot Tolton Jackson outside the bar after she refused his advances towards her. His lawyer, Wendy Williams, said that the suspect and the victim knew each other. Williams claimed that when the 2 hugged each other outside the bar, McKinney's firearm, which he was carrying in his jacket, accidentally discharged. She added that her client fled because he was in fear for his life. During McKinney's preliminary hearing, a witness who worked as a security guard at the bar testified against him, saying he'd heard the suspect saying he was going to murder someone. Additionally, he claimed that moments before Tolton Jackson's death, he saw McKinney's arm rising and appearing to be aiming something at the victim before a flash went off. But the defense said no one saw McKinney with a gun during the incident. On February the 16th of 2017, McKinney pleaded guilty to 1 count each of 3rd-degree murder, resisting arrest, fleeing and eluding, and 2 counts of recklessly endangering another person and firearms violations. He was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison and 3 years probation in exchange for his plea. Thanks for watching. Which politician would you least like to go on a date with and why? Let us know in the comments section below.